referendumsquared.com.
First past the post is a conservative system, ladies and gentlemen, slouching, manipulative, untrustworthy, and dishonourable. Our politics isn't openly criminal, like in other countries, many other countries, but it is corrupted by over-centralisation. There are many causes to this over-centralisation, but the valve that pumps dishonesty into the body politic is electing MPs by first past the post and preparing for those elections beforehand.
And I want to say something for first past the post. It's simple, but it's also adaptable. It's seen us through 2 world wars, the Depression, 60 years of prosperity and massive post-war change. It's never elected extremists. It's allowed strong governments, like Blair and Thatcher. It's also allowed compromising governments like Macmillan and Wilson.
The only way that we can exercise that power is what I've called removal van government. The removal van that comes to number 10 the day after an election where governments lose. And for all of its faults, the first past the post system does create situations where governments are regularly, on average about once every 8 or 10 years, are thrown out. And that is a very, very good discipline for powerful politicians.
And the problem with our system is that first past the post system in one seat cannot cope with what that means in practice. It cannot cope with the fact that increasing numbers of Britons simply do not want to vote for one of the great duopoly, despite the fact that they are constantly told that to do anything else is effectively a waste of vote, and despite the fact that actually under that system increasingly it has been a wasted vote.
I think I'd like to concentrate, if I may, on the actual subject, which is the alternative vote, a system used in Fiji, I believe nowhere else, and comparing it with the first past the post system used by about 2.5, a bit more, 2.8 billion people, the USA, the largest democracy in the world, India, and the mother of democracies, of course, Britain.
With all due respect, Rodney, you said that only Fiji has the alternative votes. Well, actually, as the No to AV literature correctly says, it's Fiji, Papua New Guinea and Australia. They make out that this means it is terribly unpopular around the world and therefore we should not adopt it in Britain. Well, you know, if you'd had a debate about the franchise in the 1860s, you could have said, and perhaps people did say, we should not give women the vote because the only places in the world where women have the vote are the Pitcairn Islands and, wait for it, South Australia. I have to say, Australians were out of line then, they're out of line now, they were right then, and they're right now. But on the facts of the case, if the issue of the BNP is at stake, it is no contest. First past the post does help the BNP at local level. AV would wreck them.
What do you do if you've got 45, 46, 47% of the vote and the person who's going out, the first person who's going out, you want to get his votes? Now, I think most MPs would ignore that. Most would-be MPs ignore that, but some won't. So what you're asking for is a system that encourages a would-be MP to try to win the votes of the outgoing extremist. There's one thing worse than having the BNP win is having other people adopt their stance and their policy.
We heard earlier, well, won't parties be scrabbling in the gutter for the second preferences of BNP voters? Well, we can look at what happened. We don't have to guess. We can look at what happened in London in 2008. The BNP did sufficiently well to pick up, under proportional voting, to pick up a member of the Greater London Assembly, and Boris and Ken both had to fight for preferences. And to their credit, neither man pandered to the BNP right for the BNP vote. They didn't do it.
Now, I have to tell you that Peter Kellner gave evidence to the Jenkins Commission in favour of AV, and I have to tell you that they roundly rejected his evidence. And the reason they did it was actually very honourable, because Jenkins, remember, Lib Dem peer, and one of the reasons he said was because it was so unfair to certain parties and so over-fair to his own Liberal Democrat Party.
I would contend that the Liberal Democrats will find, if they get AV, that very quickly that a lot of the support they've got in the last 20 years, the generalised protest vote, the generalised we want cleaner politics vote, the generalised anti-big battalion vote, that will fracture.
There may be an attraction now to say in the Labour Party, let's go for a deal with the Liberal Democrats by voting for AV. But if they did that, they would find that the Liberal Democrats would do the dirty on them in the end, and they would be the kingmakers of politics, even though they were a minority.
The simple fact is you've got two ways to fight the election. You can fight to maximise support, in which case I hope you fight on high principles, you fight on strong arguments, you fight on what you believe in, not what you don't believe in. Or you can fight to minimise opposition. And that's what this system encourages, people fighting to minimise opposition, what somebody called hedge your bet politics. Of course, what it does is it maximises broken promises.
But I'd ask you to consider one objection which has been made to AV repeatedly. Okay, and I absolutely love this. What David Davis has said is it lets in unprincipled government that doesn't have to follow its manifesto. Ask David Davis where in the Conservative manifesto you discovered the proposal to fundamentally alter and reform the National Health Service in the way in which the government is currently doing.
On this issue of coalitions, look, let's be grown up. All politics in all countries is about coalitions. You have coalitions within parties, you have coalitions sometimes between parties. Let's not imagine that there is some nirvana where you have a pure politics in which everybody agrees and they can get a majority of votes. There is no democracy on earth where that has ever happened or will ever happen.
One example, in Germany, the parties before an election say which party they will go into coalition with before the election. And the process of arriving at a process of a coalition outcome is openly negotiated. It isn't behind closed doors. So this is a kind of, if you like, our experience of coalitions is a consequence of this first-past-the-post, winner-takes-all culture. It's not what a proper, honest coalition government would be about.
Whatever Anthony says about the way it's done in Germany, the simple truth is when you vote for a party in Germany, you can never be sure which bit of its manifesto, if any, you're going to get if it gets into government.
The deepest unfairness of the alternative vote is that the 70% of the population who vote for the first or second candidate in any given constituency would only get one vote. But the 30%, often Liberal Democrats, but also the single-issue parties, get multiple choices. They can cast a vote for the people they want, and they can cast a vote against who they don't want. And the contrast between that and the simple one person, one vote, think what they stand for, think whether that's what you mainly want, and vote for them, is very sharp.
It is modest, AV. It's not a big reform, it's a minor reform, and in fact, if there's any criticism of it at all, it's actually that it goes nothing like far enough. In fact, I'm going to have to be extremely ill-mannered and disagree with something that Anthony Barnett says here. I don't think it will have a lot of the effects that he says it will have. I think it will have some effects, but the biggest effect is to reconnect the voter with their vote.
If you ask your child his favourite colour, or her favourite colour, you probably get a very thoughtful answer, or favourite pudding. You probably get a very thoughtful answer for the first choice and for the second choice, but it's very well attested academically and in all our private lives. When you get to, well, what's your third, your fourth, your fifth choice, they've lost interest. They don't think about it, they're bored by it. And exactly the same thing happens if you're asked to cast a vote really right down the line. What happens is you're irresponsible votes are encouraged.
I do find what Rodney has just said rather patronising, sense of it's all raving monster loony party and references to children. If somebody under the AV system wants to say, I want to vote Green or I want to vote UKIP, and then that doesn't add up, they can then say, okay, there is a choice between the two main parties, and I'm going to transfer my vote to that. And that's a perfectly adult and responsible thing to do.